Welcome to the MadTrio podcast. This week we have the California Pariah, Jonathan Charney, James the Fat Man Stevens,
hello,
and the man who's always wanted to meet Cinderella. Not the character, the 80s band that nobody remembers.
Dude, nobody's fool is the Jam. Don't fuck around.
So, we told you last week that Ryan and James would kind of give their opinion about what my friends message to us about our anti-rape episode. I guess would be the best way to describe it. So, it's
our PSA episode.
We were really taking a hard stance. I don't know why it's considered a hard stance, but apparently it has been.
I was saying that sarcastically when I said we were taking the hard stance on rape, and I hope last episode I didn't come off as too sort of flippant about the the thing. I'm sad that people would think that we wouldn't take a hard stance on it. You know what I mean? That there's people out there in society that wouldn't flat out just like non-qualifyingly say fucking rape is the worst thing, you know.
But my after reading her response, I'm just gonna quote a couple things real quick, and because I think this goes back to something that Ryan was talking about last week, and what my issue is when she says this is rape is not being used and thrown around. Women are starting to be more confident to step forward. I don't have anything wrong with that, but what I wanted to point out is she says at the end, this wasn't as cringy as I expected 3 straight white dudes discussing sexual assault would be. Now, if I take that and place that up to the thing of it's not being used and thrown around, quote unquote, if it wasn't being used as frequently and as abusive as it is sometimes, then I don't think it would have been cringy for someone to think that 3 straight white males on a discussion of rape.
Well, what do you mean by thrown away? I mean, far as
a
woman saying, "Oh, this guy raped me," in the wrong way.
To a sense of, there have been cases where women have used, "Oh, he raped me," when it fits their means.
I think
that as it's being used, it becomes desensitizes somebody to the point that where it comes to 3 white dudes, straight white dudes talking about rape, it kind of makes some females feel that way. Of cringeworthy, because why would we not be against rape, for one? For two, if it's not being used to the point that it is being abused, then she wouldn't even have that response. Thinking that 3 white guys would be upset about it being used again is what my point is.
I think her point, and this is just me speaking on her behalf, was the fact that the amount of cases of women being raped versus the amount of cases of women
abusing
the rape there's an imbalance. Yeah. More women are raped than
I got that impression as well, and that's actually one of the things I wanted to say. Is I mean, this is nothing true, and I swear to you, I'm not one of the like everything is fake news people. I'm one of the people that may or may not know how to actually vet sources. I look beyond headlines, and I'll actually read an article or two if I'm interested enough in something. But I'm also a fan of statistics, and sort of independently finding, different sets of research data that point to one thing versus another. But the media, that all being said, the media has always disproportionately reported certain things, so they'll make it sound like a vocal minority is the majority in a particular issue. Blanket statement, by the way. When it comes to this one, certain, I don't even want to put it on sides because it's sort of bipartisan in this regard. Certain media organizations, or if you look in just down the right streets, you're going to see what feels like a disproportionate amount of women.
Hey, Ryan, you cut out there if you want to repeat what you just said.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
My internet hates you, apparently.
That's all right. I was just saying that there's, if you look down certain avenues of media, again, not bipartisan in general, you will find whatever you kind of tend to seek a pattern towards. So you'll see disproportionately amount of things being reported as far as these two kids consensually had sex. We have recordings of text messages where they said, hey, make sure to bring condoms. And the chick ends up claiming that he raped her. That might seem like it happens a lot based on the amount of reporting you may or may not have seen on it. And same is true for the inverse. So just because X thing is reported X amount of times doesn't mean that's indicative of how often it happens. So it's important for people to realize if they're talking about murder in a particular place or rape in a particular place or crime in general, it's important to kind of look into, you would think the world's going to hell in a handbasket if all you did was watch the fucking news because all you ever see is murder. But if it bleeds, it leads, right?
Yeah.
So obviously people are dying. I don't know if it's obvious, but people are dying by violent crimes in record low numbers throughout the entirety of history. There's no safer time you can possibly be in than literally this very second.
I would probably add in Western cultures, because there's definitely parts of the world that
no. In as a whole, as humanity,
you think so? Even considering
I demonstrably true. I promise you, this is true.
Say in the Middle East, some parts of Africa, where women are still more treated like a cat, like a horse is higher up in the food chain than a woman. Even those countries.
Yeah, even those places that are still doing literally, human rights or human, what's the word I'm looking for? Crimes against humanity. The worst things possible to do to other people in these different countries is happening in less numbers than ever. Now, obviously, we can really just start counting recent history, because you get back far enough and you have the Roman Empire and Mongols, and fucking you were dying, your friends were dying left and right. But just throughout sort of modern history, it has been so less and less every single year, to the point where like the trend is in the right direction, despite what, again, media the impression that you might get from media. Obviously, nobody in the media is saying, hey, everyone lock your doors, because they're coming to get you right now. It's just, I've seen 20 murder stories and one story about cute dogs.
True.
So apparently there's only one cute dog out there, and everyone I know is going to be murdered.
So it's funny. A guy I used to work with always liked bringing up a story. He said at some point in time there was a news station that all it did was report happy stories. His comment was it lasted about as long as some of their commercials.
Yeah, I was just going to say that must have been about 5 minutes of that.
So,
but anyway, that was all a really long, fucking winded way of saying that I get what she is saying as far as it might be in disproportionate numbers.
So I ran across something, and not to make the last couple of episodes like some sort of comment on culture, but I thought this was fascinating. There was my Twitter's not working great right now, but it's the idea of toxic masculinity. And it says it's one of the ways in which the patriarchy, this is according to the website, is harmful to men. It refers to this socially constructed attitude that describes the masculine general as violent, unemotional, and sexually aggressive, and so forth. As well known as the masculinity men's right movement that is mostly anti-feminism and has yet to appear, for a silencing tactic is used to discredit the patriarchy harm to people who are not men. So basically this person's Twitter comment was really, what are ways that toxic masculinity is bad for men? My first thought was, I'm not sure if, I don't like the word toxic, because if you said, toxic femininity, they'd get very pissed. And so this is me just being, the shoes on the other foot, saying, can you agree with the idea of toxic masculinity? But I do kind of agree with some of the people's points, because men, socially, at least in the United States, and I'd probably say most of the world, men are supposed to be stoic, unemotional, type of thing. So I was kind of wondering what you guys thought of that. because this is a conversation I've seen more and more with kind of the social justice warriors, some of the more feminists, probably the more close to fourth wave feminists than the earlier wave feminists. So what do you guys think?
I think I see too many men walking around in shorts. Put your pants back on.
Okay.
I don't give a shit, honestly. Like, why is this toxic masculinity even an issue? I think, as far as that goes, men, most men shouldn't give a shit.
I have a few thoughts. One, the male, what do you call it? What was the word? Men's rights activists.
Yeah.
That's 4 assholes fucking on the internet. I can't imagine that there's any large number of group of men who are thinking to themselves, we got to protect our fucking rights.
Well, here's
that's the dumbest thing ever.
Well, here's where I disagree with you to some degree. In California, what I'm about to say is not as common, but traditionally, say if you're getting divorced, 99% of the time, traditionally, the woman, no matter what, would always get the kids. Now, in the state of California, it seems to be the opposite for some people I know, especially when the husband seems to be a real piece of work. So I think their motives are in the wrong direction. Far as some of these guys are really anti-women, but I don't understand. Because I feel the same way about some of these feminists where they seem to be hardcore. I think if people are more geared towards, equality, what they call it, egalitarian, or the fact that there's an equal middle. And that's what I think some of the people I've seen are kind of talking about is even though I don't think men have as much to worry about to some degree as women do. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we have a cat who just entered my fucking studio.
Yeah, they won't stay out. I've chased them off a couple times. I think if we really put some thought into it, I think that what they've done is they're trying to make it equal rights for women, and when they did that, they kind of pushed the male dominant side back, which I don't really necessarily have an issue with. I think that any job a man can do, a woman can do if she puts her mind to it and effort. But I think this whole movement of, I guess, kind of squashing the male dominant, I don't know, like the male personality of being able to go out there and I guess put in hard work and things like that. I don't know. I don't see it as an issue.
Well, here
that's my thing. Like, why is this an issue? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's skinny jeans, buns, and fucking hipsters, douchebag beards.
Well, hold on, real quick. Here's some examples on this website. See the so persuasive idea. Is the cat completely out of there? If you check over there, the idea of that male and female interactions are are competition, not cooperation. I would say that's a guy thing. I know more guys are competitive than women. The idea that men truly cannot understand women and vice versa, and following that no true companion can be had between different sexes. I would disagree. I do think there's a gender difference. It's what they call it, the love languages. There's just a difference between the way men and women think. The idea
by and large, I mean, obviously, where there's fringes.
There's a couple more.
Address that.
There's a couple more I want to read just real quick.
As far as I heard on all of that is wham. That's all I heard.
Let's see. The relative idea that men cannot be a victim or of abuse, or that talking about it is shameful. I would say that's more the broski culture to some degree. I don't think that's a man issue. I do know people who have kind of thought that way, and to be honest, they were on the lighter end of the chromosomes. Let's see. The idea that real men should be prepared to be violent even when it's not called for. I would say partially that's because men are geared to be in some little bit geared towards to be a little bit more vigilant on that side of things. That men for some reason are hardwired to not maybe run, but the response is to fight it. Because I know more guys that if somebody came up, they'd say, "Well, I got no choice." Where most women I know
I don't.
would won.
I ain't running away.
Yeah.
Maybe for downhill.
Well, I mean, because I know a lot of women that say, when somebody creepy comes up, they'll cross the street, they'll do this. There's a lot of steps involved. When most guys I know will go, the worst comes to worst is I get stabbed type of thing.
Well, here's the thing. I think with that is that it's something that we do actually have in our back pocket. You know what I mean? Like if I'm scared to walk down the street, I can hit the gym and get a lot fucking bigger, take a couple of boxing classes, you know what I mean? And
a lot of
learn how to
roids.
fucking protect
You're a little
myself
guy.
well.
You need roids, man.
Nothing's going to help you there, man.
I mean, I'm not that little. I mean, look, I'm completely out of shape. I'm skinny. You know what I mean? I'm a $185 walking around. So if I literally just started working out, I'd probably walk around. Well,
wait a minute, you're a
$165.
$185? What do you carry in your pockets? Like a lead-weighted dildo? You know that's illegal in California, right?
Because aren't you like
Is
4'9"?
Yes, it is illegal to carry a lead-weighted dildo in California.
Well, Ryan digests that. There's a couple of more examples.
So you got to pull it out.
But no, I'm 6 feet tall, Johnny.
I know. There's a couple other examples I actually want to
Well,
talk about just real quick, because these are ones that have always kind of personally bothered me. The myth that men are not interested in being parents and inherently unsuited to being single parents. I have known women, I have known men, I have known a combination of everything that have actually thought men shouldn't be parents.
You've seen shits with kids?
I've actually known people who...
I won't explain that term on here.
I've actually known people who, like a guy approaches a kid, the woman grabs their kid and think, oh, he's going to do something.
Is he dressed as a clown?
The other one is emasculation, the idea that that men shouldn't be interested in the traditional feminine activities. I don't get that, really.
Shit, I cook for a living.
Most of these,
I don't care.
Most of these, I actually agree that if there's a toxicity to any of those, I don't get it because I don't.
Well,
as far as my activities,
there's not a toxicity. I mean, the terms masculine and feminine. It's just it's the noises that we make with our face to fucking describe certain behavior. It's not supposed to, kind of imply. I mean, obviously, look, I know the role of language, and things have a meaning, but it's just like you can't say that this thing is masculine or feminine. It's just kind of what we called certain things, but I don't think there's such a thing as like an activity being inherently sort of masculine or feminine. If a dude's into it, then whatever. If a chick's into it, then whatever.
So I think you could call it like our conversation last week of it being like
stereotypes.
It's a
That's what I was
stereotype
thinking of, too. I mean, all the stuff you read that are the masculine toxicity bullshit. It's just the extreme stereotypes that they have going on. I mean, women can grow beards.
Yeah.
But
here's the thing: is there's nothing wrong with being a man or acting like a man, and there's nothing wrong with being a woman or acting like a woman, and there's nothing wrong with being a woman acting like a man or vice versa.
So
I mean, there's a song about it. Dude looks like a lady.
Here's the thing with the toxic masculinity thing. I don't know if skeptical would be the right word, but in as much as I don't think it was the same thing we were talking about last time with like rape culture. There's no place in society that I've ever fucking heard of in an American society, at least in this country, you know what I mean? That's the only thing I can speak to, where any type of fucking behavior like that would ever be acceptable. So, some dude acting like a fucking asshole is still acting like an asshole.
So some of this I could see. I've heard it specifically about the guys in the 40s and 50s and 60s because a lot of these guys were in the military. In the military, there is a certain personality type, a certain way of life that's beaten into you. And so that's where some of this my guess is a culture that by necessary means really had to be military in some way. And that's kind of what I think some of it comes from, because some of these guys in these Twitter feed said, my dad never said, I love you. My dad never hugged me. There's a lot of things that the traditional guys now, I hug my son every night. But they just didn't do because of a culture. So I think what it is, and this is a complete guess, it was just a cultural norm for that time because of circumstances out of their control. It's the only thing I can think of, because it's true. I mean, traditionally guys were supposed to be some degree of stoic. The woman or the wife or the girlfriend was more emotional. This is a caricature of a society, especially Western society at one point. So I do think some of it has some base in reality. I think it's a stereotype. If you're curious on this list, it's geekfeminism.wiki.com/toxic_masculinity. If you're curious about it, this seems to be a something that's been come up. It's been there for a while, but especially after the Me Too movement, it seems to be something that I've been seeing a lot more of over the last couple of months.
You know what I'm realizing I kind of like about all these things, regardless of some of the fringe ones maybe get, their messages crossed or give the wrong impression about sort of their feelings, is that women are actually starting to really throw their weight around. You know what I mean? Like, in as much as like, oh, okay, yeah, in today's society, this will be a force to be reckoned with. You know what I mean? Whether we sort of feel it might be right or wrong, that's almost beside the point. It's like, oh, now we have a contender.
I think,
and it's a strong one, and it's like all these people just realize, like, oh shit, we're actually strong together. You know what I mean?
I think the only thing women have against them, and this is from what I've heard and then from what I've experienced talking to friends of mine, is you really there's two type like female bosses, and this is coming from friends of mine. Is you have the female boss that's overly friendly, or you have the bitch boss. And because she's being mean to you for whatever reason, she's automatically bitchy. That's the one thing that I've heard from women that there is. You're either a bitch or you're nice. And I think that's the one thing that society is slowly having to adjust to. That because I've had plenty of male bosses that were real pieces of work. And the last thing
we call them assholes. It's the same thing.
Yeah,
but for dudes.
And I would say that the other thing is women have against them is, and I've actually heard this on person, and I'm surprised nobody punched the dude, is the guy said, oh, my girlfriend's on the rag. She's just being a bitch. It's like, dude, you, and your girlfriend or wife just didn't smack you from that. Maybe she just is having a shitty day. I think,
really.
I think blaming somebody's bad mood on something that's out of their control is pretty piss poor.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things about what I really think I have a fucking problem with is people's idea of justice. You know what I mean? Like, being there's a difference between the possibility of repentance and allowing somebody to sort of atone versus retribution.
So I have,
people don't want justice. People want fucking retribution for a lot of things. And it's like, hey, listen, we suffered. And the idea to make these things right is not to just not make people suffer, is to make you suffer.
So
and that's the wrong idea. And that, to me, that's the fucked up thing, is that seems to be the way society has gotten between like politics these days, the way fucking friends talk to each other, just because they have different political opinions. It fucking breaks my heart to hear the way people talk about fucking Trump supporters and things like that, as if they're evil people.
So
or as if like the things from I heard Republicans say about Barack Obama. It's sad.
So I want to
that people think that that's okay. Society should be better than the individual.
So
I mean, we all have an individual voice that can sometimes be really fucked up, but society is supposed to be that safeguard to be like, hey, no, that's not cool, dude.
So I want to bounce something off your guys' ideas, because this is something that I've been thinking about for a while. Good. Was the fact that the Judeo-Christian worldview is becoming less. For whatever reason, the Christian church has not have as much influence. Now, the basis of Christianity itself, the core message of Christianity is forgiveness because Christ died for your sin. Granted, Christians have done, and as a Christian, white male Christian, we have done some very shitty things supposedly in the name of Christ. a lot of things these Christians have
Raping,
done
plundering,
have hurt people,
genocide,
are not of
The
Christ.
crusades.
But the fact that I think what it is the core message being forgiveness. Nobody wants to forgive anymore, and I think part of
Spanish
it
Inquisition.
is because that worldview is going away and that message is going away. I think the humanistic part of wanting vengeance is kind of taking up the vacuum.
vengeance is mine.
Because if you know, what do you think,
Yeah.
Ryan?
Yeah, well, to me, I obviously this is here's where I become unpopular.
You were popular
Good point.
With the midgets.
with red noses.
I was going to say only midget clowns, but that's too specific.
I was thinking alcoholics, but okay.
Oh, well, yeah. Red noses. People still get red noses when they drink.
Yeah, if you're a midget.
That's still a thing, or did that die with like Winston Churchill?
No, there's a couple of instances on why that happens to people, but
Okay, back to your popularity
psychology.
contest.
A couple of fat, jolly, red-nosed fuckers still hanging around there.
So what were you saying, Ryan? Before you said I was
what
going
was
to
I
dislike
saying?
you?
Something about you being popular.
The idea of sort of quote Judeo-Christian worldview and sort of where those morals come from, to me is it's just human morals. It's what we know to be inherently know to be right or wrong. Obviously some people sort of fall between the cracks on their in their brain chemistry or whatever. But
I would disagree the fact that's inherent morality, because I've known a few people, and if you read throughout history, the inherent morality, the supposedly of Judeo-Christian worldviews, is not natural to humanity. I personally think, and this is my opinion, is the natural human state of things is, I want that, I take that. I think it takes more work and more dedication not to do that.
That's where I disagree. Okay,
like
so
Roman culture was a perfect example of it. Roman culture was take. You can worship any god you want as long as it's the Roman emperor.
What was the saying? We're going to create a wasteland and call it peace.
Exactly.
There's a lot of reasons why the fucking Roman Empire failed, but there's a lot of reasons why society itself we keep coming back to civilized and more civilized society, and morals are inherently true, whether or not people had motivations to ignore them back in history and things like that. But society works because it's way easier for me to we're talking obviously the beginnings of civilization here. It's way easier for me to trade with you my goods and services in exchange for money or your goods and services than it is to kill you and take your shit and then have to worry about my fucking neighbor coming over and slitting my throat and killing my family because they want all of my shit because I just robbed your shit.
You have
one of
seen
those
me
is
play
profitable, one of those is not.
So what do you think, James? In a non-joking manner. Should I come back to you?
I think there's both sides of it. I think there are a certain amount of people who don't live by any moral code. And
but by choice.
Well, I think part of it is that there was no maturity, so it goes to nature versus nurture. There was no maturity given to that person, like to teach them to think outside themselves.
Nor mentor, for example.
Yeah,
father,
Caligula being one. That guy was spoiled completely, and then we saw what he did at the Roman Empire when he finally got up there. He was a very selfish person. There's always going to be a group of people like that who we refer to as narcissistic, and that is always going to be in our culture. But then we also go back to, do you guys really think Adolf Hitler's parents were terrible people? I don't. They, as far as I've seen in history, they weren't a terrible person. But then we can go to World War I, where his brain got damaged in mustard gas. But is that an excuse for what he did? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, one of the things.
But he felt that he, in his sort of warped perception of everything, was doing the right thing for his country and his beliefs.
And that's where we come back to it. Is there was some good that he did for the German people. I was going to
Well, like,
throw in the Nazis,
wait,
but
hold
he
on.
helped fix the economy of the Nazi.
For that, when James said, when he took back the Rhineland, which was taken from them, he would have, if he just did that, would have been considered an amazing leader, because the Treaty of Versailles bankrupted Germany.
Yeah.
The positive thing, if you can actually say a positive thing
World
about
War
that,
One, for those of you who are wondering what the Treaty of Versailles was.
yeah.
Oh, never mind. I was going to say, what? You're an idiot. But
If
anyway.
there was a positive thing out of what Hitler did, was really he raised the German society up. The negative side was everything after the fact.
Well, yeah, I mean...
Yeah, but my point is it's not like all of those people thought that they didn't think that they were evil. They thought that they were doing the right thing based off of their own particular moral code. You know what I mean? But so morals, from Christianity or from elsewhere, tend to follow the same kind of trends regardless. You know what I mean? Like, my point is if you're a violent person and you're a Christian, you will be a violent Christian. If you are a violent person and a non-Christian, you will be a violent non-Christian. If you are a non-violent non-believer, you will probably be a non-violent person.
I don't disagree, but I do think to some degree, I think the message of the cross helped to calm people down to some degree. But on the other hand, in the process of all that, the people that called themselves Christians did a lot of damage to people on the sides. It was
what it did was it brought different sort of fringe religions together. I mean, it's the idea of where all of the saints come from. It's like, hey, you can kind of pray to your God, but secretly you'll be praying to our God. They were sort of adopted and repurposed and all these things, renamed in a lot of places. And it was a way for the early some of the early saints and there's a lot of saints out there as far as Catholicism goes. But that's where Christianity started. We're talking, Holy Roman Church back in the day. A lot of those saints were just, it was a lot of pagan traditions that were brought over because they wanted to bring the pagans over. It was a lot of other, cultures, beliefs and structures that were adopted into Christianity just to help bring everybody into the fold. But people were still people once they were in here, But it is, to a society standpoint, think about it as selfish. It is selfish for me to want to work together with everybody for my own benefit.
But partially, that's the United States. That's capitalism. That's business 101.
Capitalism is great in that regard. Empire is great in that regard.
Well, that's actually
it's got its fucking downside, but
that's one of the things I was discussing with somebody at work today, was the fact that business is amoral to you, and most businesses, not all businesses, but to business, like your employment, it simple comes down to a statement at the end of the month. We make so much money, and you cost so much money. Is there a benefit? No, then remove that. But
you have to think about. You have to think about how beneficial that is. As selfish as it is for that individual, how beneficial it is for the other individuals. How many people does that guy employ? You know what I mean? How much taxes do those employees pay to keep, roads and schools and things like that open? So that 100%. Person being selfish is benefiting mankind.
It's selfish and it sucks because, person A loses their job, but person, B, C, and D, may be getting a buck an hour more, might be getting a benefit out of it. It just...
but I'm talking sort of society as a whole. I mean, obviously, individually, there's going to be problems. There's going to be backdoor deals and shady things that happen. And, but it does, for the people who aren't trying to skirt the system or, it is beneficial for us to be almost as selfish in that business as possible. Like, hey, let's try to make all the money because you wanted to make all that money benefits so many people to some regard. And you being nice to your employees benefits you. That's a selfish way,
I do wish, though, that there would be a way to be more altruistic in businesses. I just don't think that business would be around for very long, unfortunately, because being selfish...
altruism is incredibly selfish as well. I mean, how many people are altruistic because of the good feeling it gives them?
I wouldn't necessarily say that's selfish. I don't know if I would necessarily call that selfish, at least not in the degree that a business is selfish. But no, I totally.
I'll give it to you like this. A lot of times in certain therapies, or if somebody's, a little down in the dumps or whatever about something, and it's, not clinical. I'm not trying to dismiss depression here in any sort of way, but a lot of times people will say, hey, you know what, go do something for somebody else. It'll make you feel better. So people will go to a soup kitchen and they'll hand out soup, and at the end of the day, they're driving away in their car going, I do feel better. So it wasn't about the people that they were helping. It was about, that good feeling you get from helping other people.
Good point.
You know what I mean? And I think inherently there's a bad feeling that you get from hurting other people. And if you choose to ignore that feeling, that's on you, but that morality is still there in your mind.
A part of it, I would say, is a former pastor of mine once said that mankind is born with a community-sized whole. So I think what you're saying about servicing other people as part of that is you're filling a need that you don't have. A lot of people who are depressed generally just don't want to be around people. Hell.
Yeah. Are you guys familiar with the Dunning-Kruger number?
Sounds familiar.
Unless it's Freddie, no.
No, I'm pretty sure it was Dunning-Kruger. Basically, it's a sort of a theory that we're sort of geared, evolutionarily speaking, to be involved intimately with about 100 to 150 people. I think I got the number right, more or less. That basically our brains have evolved to kind of keep track of that many people because, throughout up until maybe a few hundred years ago, which is nothing in the span of time, or the history of human beings, is we lived in those groups of about 100 to 150. That was your average kind of community size.
So I found,
and then nowadays we're kind of dealing with the, I'm aware of 7 billion people or more than that now. You know what I mean? And so it's hard for us to kind of take a look at our community, and see the forest for the trees as it is,
So I hate to break it to you. I don't think this is the same study. So the Dunning-Kruger effect. In this field of psychology, the Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias in which people of low ability have the illusory superiority and mistakenly asset their cognitive ability as greater than it is. The cognitive bias of illusionary superiority comes from the inability of low-ability people to recognize their lack of ability. Without the self-awareness of metacognition, their low-ability people cannot objectively evaluate their actual competence or incompetence. That is the Dunning-Kruger effect.
That's the effect, not the theory. Checkmate.
Ryan?
I'll have to figure out. No, I'm trying to figure out who the hell.
But
I'll figure it out.
I would be super curious on that study. If you can find it, send it to me. I don't know. I think the benefit. Dunbar?
Fucking Robin Dunbar.
I do think. And
Dunbar's number. That's what it was. Okay. So, here it is. Dunbar's number is a suggested cognitive limit to the number of people with whom one can maintain stable social relationships. Relationships which an individual knows who each person is and how each person relates to each other person. This number was first proposed in the 1990s by British anthropologist Robin Dunbar, who found the correlation between primitive brain size and average social group size. It goes on from there, but you get the idea.
I do wonder if some of this stuff is coming up, whether you're talking about, this, if there's a rape culture, the toxic masculinity, some of the other stuff we've talked about. Some of this was really kind of started with, at least jump started into mainstream culture because of like the Me Too movement. Because I'm aware of most of this stuff, but most of the stuff was discussed in the fringes of society than the mainstream conversation point, because most of these conversations I think are healthy to have. I think if you go too far in the conversations, it can be negative.
Okay, well, I've brought this up to John at least, and probably Ryan as well before, maybe you said it on the show, but I'm not blaming the internet, but I think it really gives credence to a lot of people who would previously have been hiding their desires.
We talked about that last week about the incel community.
You know what? So, I'll give you a real life example of exact thing you're talking about, James. Think about what people did, and not just, from this country, not to demonize one person versus another, what people do when they travel from one place to another for a war. Okay, like you go overseas for a war, whether it's us in World War I or World War II,
Vietnam,
or Vietnam, or any of these places. It's almost like the prototype of a fucking troll, because here you are in a place where no one is going to know your name, no one's going to remember, what you look like, or probably will because you're a terrible person. But you're in this place where you're
anonymous.
Thanks for noticing. So you can kind of get away with these terrible, terrible things while feeling that there's not going to be any kind of consequence, and obviously emotions are going to be heightened, because of war and the terrible things that happen regardless.
So I think you brought up something. So I want to jump to something that hopefully more people know about. I've found people that really don't know about this, but I'm sure Ryan has heard of it. John, I'm pretty sure, has heard of it as well. There was an experiment conducted at Stanford University back in 1971 where they took a group and they didn't really tell them much of what was going on, and they picked each person to role play at random. And what they did was they created inmates in this group and guards in this group.
This is called the Stanford Prison Experiment.
There's YouTube documentaries about it. There's even a movie, I believe, that Netflix put together exclusively for Netflix.
Last time
if you
I
have
it was on there. I don't know if it still is.
But this is being brought up a bunch. So what happened, which is the interesting thing, is the group that were the guards started being extremely abusive. They weren't told to do much of anything except for, you're the guard, you're the prisoner. And they were locked in for, do you remember how long it was? I don't see it on here. But anyways, there was a lot of abuse that came up that ended up happening.
Yeah,
the guards to the
inmates. It was remarkable how quickly everyone sort of fell into their roles.
Yeah.
So
it said dates are from August 14th, 1971 to August 20th, 1971.
Yeah, it didn't go on very long because they had to stop it because of the amount of...
Yeah, they had to stop because it was getting crazy.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I want to bring up is these guys that they picked, they basically did it at random. They gave them, I forget how much it was, but they paid them to do it. But they were given no instructions on how to perform it. And, I mean, you would think these guys would have some moral base, but the experiment really showed that there really was no moral base once people were given power over another.
It's the interesting thing, because there's a lot of interesting conversations that have come out of that experiment. But that's where the theory or the hypothesis rather, that given the right set of circumstances, you would have been a Nazi too.
Yeah, that's really what it was.
You know what I mean?
And so where's the moral code?
Part group mentality, part what would it take for me to go against the grain on this sort of a thing.
If you want to look at a real life example of this,
well, that was a real life example, John.
Well, yes, actually, the experiment did happen.
This wasn't fantasy,
but a more an actual real life example. This not an experiment. Look up a guy by the name of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was a pastor in Germany in World War II who spoke against the Nazis. Did it passionately, matter of fact. Ended up being put in a concentration camp and killed before the war ended. A lot of Germans kind of either went with the flow or kept their mouth shut.
Yeah.
He was a man who lived his convictions and spoke out against it and died for it. So there's a perfect example of, the crowd mentality. Matter of fact, I would see some even Trump's fans and even the anti-Trump's fans. It's the crowd mentality, because I've met plenty of people who would
say even Obama. Well, and Bush. A lot of presidents have done that.
What it is it's the...
Except for Nixon.
What do you call it? That's it. The tribe mentality. It's, I'm a Republican. I'm a Democrat. And I think what it is instead before, to some degree, it was, we're Americans. Because at some point you could say, yeah, my grandfather fought for war, or I went to war for this. So I think it was a common goal of, we're Americans, but hey, you're this side and we're that side. There was banter, this and that, but I think something happened with culture that we're more focused on the individual identity, being, I'm LGBT, I'm Muslim, I'm Christian, I'm a Sagittarius. The identity became a bigger thing than the whole, and I think that's what's hurt it to some degree.
Well, what I was kind of alluding to earlier with the 150 Dunbar number situation is when you do take a step back, and actually start investing in your community. You know what I mean? In your immediate surroundings. Yeah, I mean, imagine what would happen. I sound like a fucking hippie. Imagine what would happen if everybody did that. You know what I'm saying? Just worried about their immediate surroundings, worried about their local government. You know what I mean?
Gravy in the hog farm, baby.
I mean, it would be utopia overnight, not to get communistic. But you know what I mean, though. It's interesting what happens when you sort of focus locally and let things sort of naturally kind of progress from there. Society is meant to be better than the individual.
So this
it has that power to keep us sort of in check just naturally.
So this is where I'm going to be extremely pedantic on you. I hate the idea of utopia because it counts on things that's not
I
there.
didn't mean, hold on. It was a poor choice of words.
Well, I know, but it's just say the idea of utopia is not there because that's counting on people's ability to not think about themselves. I just don't think it's possible. I do
Lord
think,
of the Flies.
I do think what Ryan is talking about, in my opinion, is the fact that it's community. It's, as my pastor says, it's communitas. It's people living for each other and leaning on each other.
Your pastor shouldn't use that word.
Well, and being accountable to each other.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How many times were we not an asshole to somebody because the person standing next to us? You know what I mean?
I'm always an asshole.
I can actually attest to it. I've known him for 20 years. So I think what it is you hit the head on the nail, is the fact that we live, and I actually think James is right on this too. God, I can't believe I just said that. It's the fact that the internet, instead of having community in real life, it's all a community virtually. Whether it's Reddit, Xbox Live, it's IRC. I think what it is we no longer go outside. I've actually tried to talk to my neighbors and have them on barbecues. I've met one of them. The other family never goes out fucking side of their house. So I think that's
got to be how my neighbors think of me.
They have to hide the bodies.
So I think you guys are right as far as today's culture, and this has always been my thought, is there has to be something about today's culture that is toxic to some degree, because 30 years ago we didn't have any of these problems. We didn't have mass shootings. We didn't have a massive drug epidemic until like the 80s.
I call bullshit there.
Why?
There was
really.
mass shootings before.
Not to this degree.
World War II.
In the United States, school shootings.
We lined a bunch of people up and shot them. What about MIT?
That was rare back then.
What about when duels were still legal?
No, that was not the only mass shooting from.
No. I said what they said is it wasn't as common. Mass shootings. There's a mass shooting that happens in a school or some degree in the United States almost monthly or weekly. What I'm saying is,
was
I think
the Valentine Day massacre in Chicago?
No. So what it is
Maybe New York.
I think society, there's something about modern society that I do think is negative, and I think it's that. I think it's the inability. Yes, it was in Chicago during Prohibition, you nitwit. So I do think the internet has harmed society to a degree. I mean, what do you think, Ryan? Since James has been,
I think it's given as much good as it has bad, and probably infinitely more good if it is capable of than the bad stuff that people use it for. Look, there's always going to be rebels. All right, there's always going to be something to rebel against, whether it's just flat out society with no internet or whatever on the internet. You know what I mean? So there's however good society gets in the future, there's always going to be, a group of people. There's always organized crime. There's always people saying that they can subvert the system for their own benefit, and kind of is what it is. You know what I mean? It's cost of doing business.
I got one more question for John. Have you heard of the YouTube song Sunday Bloody Sunday?
I know it's a Black Sabbath song.
Oh, I thought you said YouTube.
No, you too. There was
You too, yeah.
Yes, actually, I have. Jim Cornette
But there's
used it for
another
I think that
example
was
of
the
a
one
mass
written by
killing.
The Edge.
Yeah, that's what the song's actually about, John. It's
Yeah,
not
no,
some
but what I'm
random
saying
thing.
is I don't think it wasn't as
It's
common.
not as publicized. That's what I want to bring up. It was not as publicized all over the nation or, world about the massacres that were happening around the world. But now that we have news basically live all the time, every time, it's being recorded and put out more. Columbine was before the internet was really
See,
off of
I-
dial-up and
I-
would go state to state.
But on this point, I think Malcolm Gladwell was right as far as the tipping point. If this stuff wasn't as public, I don't think some of the people would be enticed to do it, because I think some of these people who've done these school
I agree.
shootings needed help and nobody gave it to them because they were like me who was the wallflower,
Well, you had the guy recently that went and shot up the school that it was sent to the sheriff's department that, he had mental issues, that he had guns. There was even the one shooting that the cops were called out on that they never even went to.
See, I think that's what it is.
Yeah,
think
but I mean, at what point do you start getting into Minority Report sort of shit?
Oh, I'm not saying that either.
That particular one, I think, was just a clusterfuck of problems. But I do think that's the issue with the internet, is it gives people who don't have an out, whether it's a friend, a mom, a marijuana, something to help them off that ledge.
Marijuana.
Marijuana.
Have you ever met an
Take
angry
two
stoner?
of these, call me in the morning.
Have you ever met an angry stoner? I never have.
Yeah,
I have.
Oh wow! So that's what I'm saying. I think that's the negative side is the internet is and broadcasting some of this stuff is it gives people who don't see a way out, gives them a way out, and I think that's the issue. That's one of the negative side about it. I don't think it would be as common as much as it is common because I don't remember school shootings when I was a kid.
You know
at
what
all.
fucking disturbs me about the internet and that kind of shit is that you have things like the I fucking hate even saying the word because it's so stupid. The incel fucking people. Do you guys watch any of the Vice shit? I want to say we brought this up a couple of times.
We brought this
we
last
brought
week.
up incel last week,
But yeah, the fact that these fucking assholes can find each other and then start getting into that feedback loop, fuck that, man.
So I'm looking. Hold on. I'm really curious. I'm in Urban Dictionary, which could be good and bad. So here's the incel.
For incel?
Yeah, incel.
Yeah, involuntarily celibate.
A person, usually male, who has a horrible personality and treats women like sexual objects. By the way, is there such thing as an incel that's a woman? I've never. I'm not even joking. I'm being serious. I've never met.
I would imagine.
there's got to be.
Would that be the stereotypical cat lady then?
Maybe.
Yeah,
But they
I
have
got
the
nothing
decency
there,
to
John.
not
I don't
troll
know.
on the internet.
I
I don't know,
know.
man.
Because I'm just sorry. It just kind of struck me as like, whoa. I think the positive side, and this is kind of our final thoughts. I think what's happening now with the generation after the millennials is I think that they're learning, I think, to some degree, how to handle the internet. Because for a lot of the millennials, the internet was either new or it was there, but their parents
It was
bullying
too
me.
much power too soon.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like they're bullying me. Have you read the rules of the internet?
And their
What's
parents-
that?
Yeah. It was like I said, it was too much too soon, man. They gave us the golden fucking ticket. We had no idea what to do with it.
Well, the problem is the younger millennials, their parents, which were most likely older millennials, didn't really, or even older than that, didn't know that, because for me, the internet wasn't around. I was still finding books by the Dewey Decimal System. So I think when the younger millennials become parents, I think they're going to have an idea of how to integrate the internet safely into their children's lives.
Well, I mean, for us, we were pre-teens when internet was on dial-up. If you
Pretty
were
much,
lucky
yeah.
and rich.
Yeah.
And then, a few years later, dial-up was getting faster, and then we had...
And then your sister would pick up the fucking phone and fuck your whole day up.
Anyways, but what I was getting around to is that, I mean, us growing up, we were pre-teens when the internet was basically in its infancy, and we got introduced to chat rooms. MSN, AOL. What's the other one that I'm trying to think of?
IRQ,
Yahoo.
IRC, Internet Relay Chat.
Yeah, there was a bunch
Yeah.
of them that came out, and we started chatting on there, and that was a really cool thing. And then you would find all these like chat rooms that, there's shit going on here. You'd be thinking you're talking to a hot 15-year-old. That's a 45-year-old bearded man sitting in his underwear eating chips.
For the record, James was also 15.
No, I was the 40-something-year-old sitting in my underwear.
No, James.
Anyways, but
James was just the
15-year-old girl,
James was just the 15-year-old that was an asshole.
So
I was
Nothing's
just pointing out
changed.
that when we were talking to 15-year-old girls, we were also around 15.
So what was
Yes.
the big thing that was asked in every chat room by when you were starting to flirt with it?
ASL.
What was it? Hold on. ASL, that's
Yeah.
it.
Sex location.
Yep.
Location, yeah.
Yeah, so that was going around too, and we started realizing that there's fucking creepers everywhere on here, so we knew
Yep.
that going into our late teens, into when the internet was in everybody's household. There were, Ethernet cords, and what was the other thing being run underneath the?
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff. So
Back
we
in the
knew
goddamn
that.
day, man, when the one creepy guy on the street just creeped out the 4 kids who were unlucky enough to have to walk by his house on the way to school.
Yeah,
Now we
so,
just
I
creep
mean,
out the whole
James
internet.
and I, and I guarantee Ryan both know a young girl who the internet was around who basically had to couldn't be on social media because insert person here decided to say insert comment here.
Yeah.
And I think
but that like you're saying, you knew a younger girl who was doing that the generation after that younger girl was kind of the millennials, and they started coming around and they're like, oh, this is cool, what can we do with the internet? And they just basically, went places that were
Went off
like
the deep end.
jumping out of the bushes like, hey, don't do that. It's
So
like, you don't want to go there.
So I guess the best way to surmise it is when we were growing up, the internet was the wild, wild west.
Oh, yeah.
We had hamster dance and Rick rolling. These kids have fucking
The
we
dancing
had-
baby.
We had Napster, LimeWire, Audio Galaxy,
Right.
Stuff that's not around anymore. And then now, with it being more controlled, I'm hoping my children's generation maybe will be, what was it, Uncle Ben with great something, blah, 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 great responsibility.
With great
Yeah,
power
great power
comes great
becomes great
responsibility.
responsibility.
Hopefully, our children's generation will realize you have to be careful, and I'm hoping, because there's so many.
Look, at the heart of it, it's still the free flow of information, and there's
Hack the
nothing
planet.
but beauty in that.
Hack the planet, man. Hack the planet.
Hack the fucking planet.
I'm hoping. A lot of it comes down to. It really does come down to parenting. It does come to society. It does come to your neighbors. It does come down to your communitas. It comes down to what
Accountability.
Your environment and your worldview. And while I may think a Judeo-Christian worldview is probably for the best, as long as people be excellent to each other, we won't have a fucking problem.
Same team as high football rules.
Dude, you totally read my mind.
So-
Just ready to go there.
So, ladies and gentlemen, for the MadTrio podcast, as always, thank you for listening.
Goodbye.